The first property we will be covering is Can's health. The can has around 48% of health, and will be getting Can to 46% and then hitting it over the threshold. Once Can has reached its max damage, it will enter its overheat state. The Can's 48% of max health is actually changed by the 1 versus 1 multiplier. Without the 1 versus 1 multiplier, Can will have 40% of max health. The next foundational property is the independent ping property. Duck Hunt is able to ping his Can whenever he wants, during any other action, as long as he inputs neutral B. This even includes states such as hit stun, end lag, or shield broken status. The more pings and less health on the Can, its gravity will increase, and it will fall with a steeper angle. After the Can has been spawned, you can ping it 8 times before it goes into overheat. A new addition from Smash 4 to Ultimate allows Duck Hunt to continue to ping the Can while it's in its overheat state. If you look closely at the Can, you can see bullet holes appear to indicate the amount of pings on it. This animation does not update past 4, however. Next is the knockback direction rule. The knockback direction of a projectile in Ultimate is based on what side it hit an opponent. We can clearly illustrate this by using Inkling's Splat Bomb. As we can see here, Inkling places the Splat Bomb behind Duck Hunt's head. This is how he gets sent towards the left. The properties of the Can will change depending on what state it is in. Duck Hunt is able to hit a grounded Can around with attacks. When Can goes into overheat on the ground, Duck Hunt is able to pass through it before it explodes. A new addition to Smash Ultimate allows Duck Hunt to hit the Can around in the air. If an aerial Can comes into contact with an opponent, it will explode immediately. Hitting the Can also contributes to the ping cap of 8. The Can has a special gravity trick when it goes into overheat. On a hit that would send a grounded Can into overheat, Can will achieve its lowest amount of gravity and be sent flying farther than normal. The inverse of this is when Can is sent into overheat while in an aerial state. Can will achieve its max gravity and not be sent very far away from the ping or hit that sent it into overheat. Notice while Can is in an overheat state, Duck Hunt is no longer able to influence it with his attacks. And opponents will not be able to pass through a grounded overheat Can. If the opponent attacks Can in this state, it will immediately explode. Duck Hunt also can't hit an overheat Can while it is in the air. It will pass through him and immediately explode on contact with the ground. What determines the pass-through properties associated with Can and overheat Can is based on the physical hitbox of Can itself. This hitbox is disabled while it is on the ground and not overheated, but we can still hear it. Once a grounded Can goes into overheat, its hitbox will be activated immediately. Once Can is spawned, it will take about 615 frames, or 10¼ seconds, before it goes into overheat. This timer is not set in stone, and there is ways to manipulate the amount of time it takes Can to go into overheat. Pinging the Can, and/or hitting the Can, will actually delay this 10-second timer. Here we wait 9 seconds before we start a rapid jab on the Can. It's assumed that while the Can is being hit, its timer will be paused. We can delay this timer for a very long time if we use a rapid attacking move like Lucario's Aura Sphere. We're even going to 2 times speed to speed this up. Lucario's Aura Sphere cannot delay the can forever. It's still counting down, however, slowly. There is something very interesting to note here when it comes to rapid attacks on the can. With our knowledge of the ping cap being 8, we can ping the can 7 times after Lucario has hit it with Aura Sphere charge to see that the entirety of the Aura Sphere charge had only counted for 1 hit on the can. In a setup where can is being hit on every single frame, the timer can be delayed forever. The direction can pings is based on the way Duck Hunt was facing when he spawned it. However, if Duck Hunt hits the can the other direction, the can will be flipped. This flipping property also occurs whenever the can touches a wall. However, when Duck Hunt bears the can, notice how the ping direction of the can is opposite the direction of which way can was hit. Just because a move sends the can a certain direction doesn't mean the ping direction of the can has been flipped. To know exactly why a move flips can is very complicated and not necessary for this video. Just learn what ping direction the can will have after hitting it with certain moves. Next up is can damage, and there's actually 4 different parts to calculate the amount of damage can does. First up, we have the explosion of can. And as we can see here, this damage stales. The pings of can are themselves separate physical hitboxes. These pings do not stale. Remember how we mentioned the physical hitbox of can? This itself is separate damage from the can explosion. This part of the can is also affected by staling. Stale moves are on, yet it seems that different angles of the can do different amounts of damage. To make sense of what you are seeing, can has a damage multiplier based on how fast it was going before it hit the target. This is a property you may have already seen with Rob's gyro. By making the travel speeds of the can consistent, we can get consistent amounts of damage. The can was giving different amounts of damage with its arc path because during its arc, it's traveling at constantly different speeds. The fastest we can get can to travel is with the home run bat. As we can see, the multiplier is applied to the can hitbox and not the explosion of can. Because the can is traveling so fast, the explosion of the can is actually displaced. Samus ends up flying towards Duck Hunt because the explosion happens behind her. Can ownership is determined by the last person to hit the can. One way to determine the owner of can is with the pass-through property. The owner of can is allowed to pass through it in the air, and contact on an opponent in the air will automatically explode it. Can ownership extends to grounded cans as well. You may know that a can does not automatically explode if an opponent walks past it on the ground, but this is not true when can enters its overheat state. By changing ownership to the opponent, we can see that the overheat auto explosion property is also swapped. This means that the pass-through effect also extends to the ground. It may be hard to notice can ownership because of the ping return ownership property. When Duck Hunt pings an enemy-owned can, he automatically returns ownership to himself. Ownership is also returned if Duck Hunt hits the can. When being hit by an enemy attack, Duck Hunt's can incurs hit stun. Duck Hunt is unable to ping his own can, and thus return ownership to himself, until the hit stun wears off. You can return ownership immediately if you intercept the can with your own attack. This is faster than waiting for the hit stun to wear off. Now that we have established can ownership, we can talk about Duck Hunt's first major exploit, Anchor Can. A projectile will normally push can away like any other move, but what happens if we change the ownership to the opponent? Can is completely immune to projectiles that originate from its owner. The properties of Anchor Can are the same properties that lead to another state, Unreflectable Can. Normally, a reflector should lock Duck Hunt's ability to ping the can. The effects of Anchor Can are lost as soon as Duck Hunt returns ownership to himself. Take note that some reflectors will still move can in its unreflectable state because of the hitboxes attached to the reflector, not the reflector itself. While the ability to ping the can will be disabled when it's reflected, things such as ownership and pass-through properties will not be disabled. The effects of can ownership and the pass-through properties will also affect teammates with team attack off. The inability to influence can with projectiles and the inability to reflect can make more sense if you consider that the can is team-owned rather than owned by a specific player. Thus, these can exploits that we use in 1v1 are actually derived from how can works with team attack off. Thus, if the ownership of can is passed to a different team, that entire team can't influence it with projectiles, and that entire team cannot reflect the can. Despite both Falcos trying to reflect the can, because the ownership was changed with a laser, the can was never reflected. There is silly implications for the use of this knowledge, such as Isabel going on a team-killing spree. It's also important to know that self-anchor can exists, which means Duck Hunt can influence his can with his own projectiles. However, Duck Hunt Gunman and Duck Hunt Side B are exceptions to this rule. This exception belongs not only to the original Duck Hunt, but all Duck Hunts. We can see that the can changed ownership with the first laser, and now Anchor Can is applied. Yet all Duck Hunt Gunmans and all Duck Hunt Side Bs are an exception to this rule. We can call this rule the Duck Hunt Exception Rule. There is another rule that can be applied on top of this. Duck Hunt's gunmans should normally stop and shoot and hit the can instead of the opponent past it. However, if the can is in an overheat state, the shot will pass through the can. This pass-through overheat property also applies to Duck Hunt's projectiles that are not his side B and his down B, and also his teammates' projectiles. Clay Pigeon will always stop on can, however. Now I get to talk about boss ownership. We can clearly see the anchor being applied to the boss's projectiles. And since can will react to a projectile thrown by Duck Hunt, it means that Duck Hunt was not the owner of the can. By completing the same task with the CPU, which is on the opposing team, we can see that the CPU is also not the owner of can. By process of elimination, this must mean that the boss is the only viable owner of the can. If you hit can at the same time it is being pinged, you may incur stored knockback. Stored knockback will store the angle of the move it has absorbed, and the next time the can gets hit by anything, it will release that stored angle, no matter which direction the move that releases it should normally send it. This storage activation even includes moves that have no knockback. Sometimes you can store knockback without ever having to ping can. This is known as phantom storage. Phantom storage has some properties that are specifically different from regular knockback storage. You can think of phantom storage as phantom hits in Melee. They require specific angles that aren't very well known on why they occur. The previously shown phantom hit occurred while can was in the air, but it can also happen while can is on the ground. Even though we are doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, we will eventually get one. It is also possible for opponents to phantom hit the can. Let's return to regular knockback storage for now. We also know now that opponents can store knockback on the can. Having can store knockback on its initial summon isn't actually phantom stored knockback, it's initial summon stored knockback. This is because the initial summon of can is actually a ping. You can consider it the initial ping. When the can is being pinged and is rising, it is expressing its can armor. Stored knockback occurs by whatever move touches can while it is expressing this can armor. Here we can see that initial summon storage and rising ping storage is the same thing. We should also take note of other can properties going on here. It did not explode on Wolf because Wolf is now the owner of the can. We can also see that the can's direction was never flipped as the can armor ignored Wolf's redirect. One way you can set up initial summon storage with can is with the gunman. Another form of storage triggering is whiff triggering. Whiff triggering was the only known way to trigger stored knockback in Smash 4. There is not a clear reason why whiff triggering exists, but it does. It is also possible to store knockback on stage hazards. Stage-owned cans do not exist, however. The owner will still be Duck Hunt. The NES Zapper controls the priority of what it can shoot. If there is a clay pigeon out at the same time as can, the Zapper is forced to shoot the clay pigeon before it can resume shooting the can. One of the properties of the Zapper is Duck Hunt will go into an idle state if the Zapper is shot right next to him. This applies to both the Zapper of can and the Zapper of clay pigeon. As long as Duck Hunt is performing an action while the Zapper shot is going off next to him, he will not be affected by the cowering state. There is also Zapper priority for when Duck Hunt is using a smash attack. Duck Hunt cannot ping his can while a smash attack is going off. This smash attack priority also affects the clay pigeon. Duck Hunt can interrupt the shots on his clay pigeon by inputting a smash attack. And just like the can, Duck Hunt cannot pop his clay pigeon while a smash attack is going on. If you mash ping a can while you are charging a smash attack, however, you can bypass this priority. This is not possible with AB smash turned on. Also, if you stop mashing can during this state, the priority will resume as normal. One of the most important texts to know about Zapper is ping carryover storage. Pings do not trigger stored knockback, and the ping is carried over through multiple types of pings. The pings attached to clay pigeon, Duck Hunt's can, and Duck Hunt smash attacks all apply. It is also important to know that stored knockback can be triggered while the can is in the air. Here we can see initial storage setups of Wolf's laser on the can. But as we can see, no knockback is stored if can is shot in a grounded state. However, if Wolf shoots 2 lasers at the can, the second laser will have its knockback stored. There is a priority to this storage. The first projectile to touch an anchor can gets its knockback stored. Anchor can is simply another expression of can's armor, and the expressions of can's armor are what cause stored knockback. In this clip, Wolf's laser was both the projectile that changed ownership to Wolf, and the first projectile to store its knockback on the can. Regular stored knockback will ignore the can flipping property. Phantom storage, however, will apply the can flip. Regular stored knockback will not apply any damage to the can. Duck Hunt can store multiple home runs on the can, as no damage is being added. Reminder that can has 48% health. Thus we can determine that Phantom storage also applies damage to the can, when regular knockback storage does not. We also know that regular stored knockback does not add to the ping count. It still totals 8, as the first ping is used for storage. Phantom storage, however, will count the phantom hit for the ping cap. It is impossible to get a phantom hit if that hit would send can into overheat. Not every projectile can be initially stored. This is not a problem for physical hits. In the case of Thunder Jolt, only the anchor can will store the knockback. And a projectile with no knockback, like Fox's laser, has no angle to be stored at all. There are certain projectiles that can be initially stored. The damage of the projectile is not a factor, however. In some cases, a projectile can have both outcomes. Also be aware that projectiles can phantom hit the can. We can do a simple damage calculation to prove that this is a true phantom hit. The rules of anchor can interacting with projectiles are still not fully understood and are still being investigated.